Hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. Welcome to 360 of Opera Live. Our guest today is American soprano Laura Strickling. And we are here today to talk about a lot of things, but one of her very special projects called the 40 at 40 project. Hello everyone, welcome. Hi Felix. As always, please let us know where you're tuning in from. We will have time at the end to have questions, to have a little Q&A. So we'll give Laura a minute to join. I know this is her first time. There she is. This is her first live. So let's get her in. Perfect. Hi, Natalie. Hi, Laura.
Hello. How are
How are
you?
you?
I'm very well. I'm very excited to be here. This is my first Instagram live ever. So
I know. I was just telling people. I was like, "She's here," because I've had moments sometimes where people like didn't totally understand how to do this. I know the first time can be a little tricky, but you nailed it.
I think this entire year has been Laura learns tech. I get a new skill every time I do one of these kind of things on any platform, and it's like I feel so accomplished.
Yeah, and then once you do it a couple times, you're like, "Oh, this is easy," but you have to do it first to be
Yes,
comfortable. I
yes.
totally understand. Well, welcome.
Hello.
We have a bunch of people joining us. I was telling them a little bit. Osia's here. Hi, guys. I was giving them a little preview. I want to talk about your 40 at 40 project, but also about all the other amazing things you've been up to, about your career. And we're definitely going to leave a little bit of time at the end if people have questions, little Q&A style.
Great.
So welcome. Thank you for joining us. To start, can you tell us where you are? Because I think that's already an interesting topic.
Yeah, so I live on the island of St. Thomas in the US Virgin Islands. And I was going to try to do all of this outside so you could see Megan's Bay in the background, but it's too windy today and it kept knocking my camera over. So I was like, I'd rather not get disconnected. But it is really beautiful here. It is summer all year round. And I'm from Chicago originally, so you'd be surprised how much I miss snow sometimes. We don't get it.
Yeah, I don't think I would miss it. It's fine. Well, if people want to get a sense for it, they can visit your website. You have
Yeah.
gorgeous photos on there. So can you tell us how is it that you ended up there? It's not an obvious place to live for an opera singer.
It's not. So it's a long story that starts with my husband having a job in Afghanistan for
Mhm.
3 years, and then he got offered this job in St. Thomas, and I was like, well, that's an upgrade, at least as far as travel and personal safety. So, it wouldn't have been my first choice of a place to live or try to run this crazy career from, but it's a lot. It's a beautiful place. It's a wonderful place to call home. It's a very tight knit community. It's like a small town kind of feel. So yeah, I bet. I'm not sure how I ended up on an island in the Caribbean, but be careful who you marry because they might drag you to the Caribbean.
Right. But would you say, because I feel like today, and especially with the pandemic, so much of the virtual and technology, like we've progressed so much in the last year. So a lot of the work that you've been doing, recording and working with composers, like you can do it from everywhere, anywhere, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing is, before the pandemic, I had to work really hard to prepare my music ahead of time so that because I didn't have a pianist to work with here. There's
Hmm.
not a large musical community here. And so
Hmm.
I would have to think many months out, and I have this gig, and how am I going to have the music learned in time to work with this pianist in this city that I'm going to be in? So it required a lot of planning ahead, which is not a bad skill to have. But in this past year, like I mentioned at the very beginning, I'm picking up all of these digital skills and new technologies. Like I didn't own a microphone before the pandemic. I didn't know how to use iMovie or GarageBand or any of these things. And so
Mhm.
I've picked up these skills, and now I can make distance collaborations with different people. I can learn music from afar. And a lot of the pianists are picking up these skills too. So I
Yeah.
can say, hey, I need to learn this. Could you make, I'll pay you to make this recording for me, and then I'll learn it at home. And then, it actually adds a lot of flexibility to my life being here. I would say the biggest drawback has been, I'm starting to see my friends find ways to do distanced performances live in the locations that they live in. And it's
Mhm.
not as much of an option. I have done a couple of things. My friend Gil
Mhm.
Chris Sproul has done a couple of things that I've been involved with here in the last year, but I can't just jump back in safely locally for the most part, because I have to get on a plane to work, and I'm not ready to do that quite yet. I'm hoping to do
Yeah.
it next month, but
Once you have the vaccine, are you getting the vaccine or?
I've actually been vaccinated since the last week in January. I was one of the first
Oh, wow.
people to
Great.
get it, right? Because I teach at the university here, and faculty members were
Right.
prioritized. So I'm vaccinated, but even then, I was vaccinated in the middle, the fully vaccinated by the first week in February. I had a gig with Brooklyn Art Song Society scheduled for February, the end of
Mhm.
February. And I still just didn't feel like it was a smart move to fly to New York the last week in February for that, and I unfortunately had
Yeah.
to cancel. But next month, everything feels like just the grip is loosening, and next month feels like it's going to be possible.
Yeah. Okay, that's wonderful. Yeah, I understand the one thing. Flying is a whole other. I know.
Yeah.
Like I am getting on a plane after a year and a half next week, just to Florida. It's not that far, but I'm still like very like aware.
I
When
think I
people.
forgot how to pack a suitcase. Do you know how to pack a
Yeah,
suitcase
yeah.
anymore? I don't remember.
Yeah. Well, before we get to, I want to talk about your album. I want to talk about the 4040 project. Before we get there, and to kind of, I feel like it comes from this that we're discussing where you live and these beautiful exotic places where you've lived. Um, I was reading your bio, and I would like to talk a little bit about your journey, your career. I find it so interesting how you've just like as a mirror of your life, I would say, you've really like crafted curated a very unique career with a lot of work on art song and new music and contemporary music and collaborating with composers. So can you walk us through a little bit how your journey has been with opera, art song, contemporary work, and how it got you here?
Sure. So this is actually where the long story comes in, because I started out life always wanting to be a singer. Literally, since the earliest memory I have, I wanted to be a singer. Now, when I was 5, I wanted to be Sandy Patty because she was everything to me. But as I grew up and was exposed to different styles of music, opera became, that felt right to me. And so I went to college, it just to be a singer, and then I went to grad school to be a singer, and then I finished grad school and realized I had no idea how to become a singer. I and I'm not even sure that was anyone's fault, because how do you become a singer? There's no playbook. And so my husband was starting law school when I finished grad school, and I just decided to take a step back. I became the accreditation specialist for the National Office for Arts Accreditation, and then did that for a couple of years. And then my husband got this grant to study Arabic in Morocco. So we moved to Morocco for a year and just studied Arabic. And I thought, well, maybe I'm going to become a translator. I don't know. Anything's possible. But when we came back from Morocco, I had to decide what I was going to do with my life, because I left my job as the accreditation specialist, and I still didn't know how to become a singer. But my husband said, you were always supposed to be a singer. That's what you were supposed to do. Like, you should be doing that. And I kind of looked at him like he was a crazy person who had 4 heads, because I still didn't know how to become a singer, and I didn't have a network, and I hadn't taken a voice lesson in 4 years, just a long time, just you don't understand, like there's atrophy. I didn't
Yeah.
know how to sing anymore. So I found a teacher in the Washington D.C. area, which is where we lived, and her
Mhm.
name is Elizabeth Daniels. And
Mhm.
because I had taken off 3 to 4 years from singing and from actively pursuing a career, I was starting from scratch. All of the habits that I had from being a young singer who was still trying to figure out their technique, they were gone, and I got to start from square one. But I was 29, and so I was like, well, taking voice lessons makes me happy, so I'm going to do that, and so I
Mhm.
did. But I still didn't know how to become a singer.
Yeah.
So the teacher I was with was very into, you need to be in competitions. Competitions are important. And I was like, okay. So I did competitions. And, at
Uh-huh.
that time, because I had taken so many years off, I could not get an audition for an opera company to save my life because you need letters of recommendation.
Mhm.
You need a resume that has work on it. And so
Mhm.
every application I sent out for an audition, they would cash my check, but they wouldn't hear me for an audition.
Mhm.
But competitions will hear you. So I
Right.
would, so I started doing competitions, and that's where I started not only building a repertoire, like in art song, opera, and oratorio. I built this repertoire because it had to be the best it could possibly be so that I would do well in that competition. Because even if I was only competing against myself. It wasn't like, oh man, I need to beat that person or this person. It was like, I have to do a good job for me because this is what brings me joy. And
Yeah, and
so
just to present yourself to people who could potentially call you in a different
well, I
situation.
I don't think I knew that at the time, to be honest. If I wish I was that savvy, but that's exactly what happened. So even though I couldn't get auditions, people heard me. And that's how I built my network. And my
Mhm.
first gigs came out of those kind of experiences because someone
Mhm.
heard me somewhere in a competition and gave me a gig, or I won the competition and a gig came with that. But the biggest thing that happened was a woman named Rosemary Ritter heard me at the National Nats Song Competition. And I didn't win, I got third place, but she invited me to come to Songfest the next summer. And that's where I
Mm.
started meeting composers. And that's where I fell in love
Yeah.
with art song. And so then it was like Songfest that summer, Songfest the next summer, Ravinia the next summer, Tanglewood, and then Tanglewood again. And so it just kind of,
Mm.
I don't think that I sat out and said, I love art song and this is the path I'm going to follow. I wish I was that savvy. Like I said, it was really just I followed the path that opened, and when you love something, you keep choosing that thing. And
Yeah.
so that's how I fell into a love of art song and fell into a career focused on art song. I still love opera. I still love putting on a costume. I would sing Messiah every single weekend if someone would let me. I love oratorio. I love all of the things that singing brings into my life. But that's kind of art song is what I've become the most kind of pursued for in the industry now.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Wow. I love it. I love hearing people's journeys because I think it's good for everyone to hear. There is some sort of an idea for young singers when they go to school of like how a path is supposed to be, and it could not be just further from the truth. Everyone has such unique stories, and I think it's super inspiring and interesting, especially like in my personal experience. I remember very much being an undergrad, and teachers telling us like, oh, you can't make a career out of like just art song or recitals, like the
Mm-hmm.
career is in opera.
Yeah.
And that's why I found like your case so just so inspiring to me. I'm like, no, it's all music, it doesn't matter.
Right. Well,
Yeah.
I do think it is more difficult. I will say that to
Hmm.
love art song is more difficult. But like I
Hmm.
never did an opera young artist program, and I was told all through college that like if you don't get into an opera young artist program, especially one of the major ones, you're never going to have a career. I was told when I came back to singing and after my big long hiatus and came back to singing and kept pursuing these opportunities to sing song, I was told over and over by people I love and by people who barely knew me, like, you're never going to have a career in art song. You need to move this way or that way. And that's where I think knowing who you are as an artist really comes in handy, or at least it's really important. And you don't know
Hmm.
that when you're a young singer. You don't
Hmm.
know because you have to have all of these experiences
Yeah.
to know what your path is. And I guess the one thing that I knew was that I needed to be doing this. And so I
Yeah.
just kept doing it. But there really isn't one path. And if you don't get into an opera young artist program, it doesn't mean that you don't have a future in singing. And I mean that's really that's why I try to keep
Absolutely.
saying to young singers because the
Yeah.
discouragement is real out there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this that you're saying, that you don't learn how to become a singer. You can't expect to learn how to become a singer in school. School can't provide you everything, and it's not necessarily, I mean, curriculums can always be improved, based on what's happening in society, and they have to be improved and changed. But I think it's ridiculous to expect school to teach you everything, because especially as an artist, so much of what we need to learn comes from life. And this is
Yes.
exactly what you're saying. And I agree
Well, and
completely.
you can't necessarily know what you don't know, especially
Yeah.
when you're younger. I mean, taking off those 4 years, having a real world job, living in Morocco, living in Afghanistan, just like being a human being on the planet, I picked up schools that or skills that help me kind of know how to operate in the rest of my professional life. But, I don't actually hold inexperience or lack of knowledge against people because these are things you can't just like be handed a list of things that you
Yeah.
need to learn and then you'll have a career. It's kind of being true to yourself, being open to learning and being open to being a lifelong learner. Like you're never done.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you for that little. I wanted to give some context. So now we can dive into these two big projects that you kind of had like back to back. And first is your album, which is
Yeah,
your debut solo album, right? You were in a
yeah.
bunch, I saw on your website, people can check that out. You're in a bunch of recordings, but Confessions is your debut solo album, and it came out
Hmm.
in December, December,
November. November.
November,
Hmm. Yeah.
November. Uh, can you talk to us about that project? How was it something you initiated? Was it a proposal? From there, how did you pick the repertoire, the collaborators, all of that stuff?
Sure. So I didn't intend Confessions and the 40 at 40 project to be a 1-2 punch as it has kind of become because I actually started recording that album in 2017, about a month before the hurricanes Irma and Maria hit us in the Caribbean. And
Mm-hmm.
so I recorded these songs with every intention of releasing a CD in the beginning of 2018. But those hurricanes not only, made me poor, but all of a sudden just I was devastated. It was one of the most horrific things I've ever been through in my life. And as a human being,
Mm-hmm.
I did not have the emotional strength to work on finishing up that CD and putting it out that year. And
Yeah.
I had a lot of guilt about that because I had approached composers that had invested in me as a human and as me and in me as a singer. And I had asked them, like, I love these songs. They've never been recorded. Can
Mm-hmm.
I record them? And then I recorded them and they just sat on a shelf. And I had so much guilt about that because I wanted their music. The whole reason I wanted to record the music was that I thought it was exceptional and I wanted to promote it. And so I had just like, oh, I can't believe I still haven't gotten this CD out, right?
Mm-hmm.
So 2018 passed, and I had a baby in there too. So like just between having a baby, trying to recover from this super traumatic event, trying to keep my career afloat, in light of both of those things,
Right.
all of my energy went there. And then the pandemic hit and I had time. I was stranded on an island with no gigs to learn music for or places to get on a plane to go sing at. And so all of a sudden I had the gift of time. And I had done a recording with Yarlung.
Mm-hmm.
I was part of a project for the composer James Matheson that included one of his pieces with the Chicago Symphony, and I recorded his art song cycle, Times Alone. So I had this really great relationship with this label, and I called them up and I said, hey, I have this recording project that is complete. I need to start approaching labels, but we have a great relationship, and I really like the niche that you have made in the music world with the kind of recording you do and the kind of people you work with. Would you be interested in, even though they usually make their own recordings, like they do it from start to finish, and I said, would you be interested, even though this is already recorded, in taking this project? And they said, yeah, absolutely. And so, but between March and November, there's so many things that go into taking a project from recording in hand to on the market. So we had the time because their life was on hold as well. So the pandemic is not a great thing, but it made it possible for me to get the CD out when I did. And then, you know, in 2019, I was sitting in a cafe in New York, and I do my best thinking in New York. I don't know why. Maybe it's just because I'm there to work, and I'm you know, task focused, and I'm surrounded by people making great art and the bustle of the city. I do my best thinking there. And I just had this realization that I have premiered so many works, but I'd never commissioned any. And I was like, well, I got to commission something. Okay, so who am I going to, I sat down and with a pen, I have this like journal that when I have random thoughts, I'm a little ADHD. So when I have random thoughts, I have to write them down or they're gone forever. So I wrote in this journal, like, commission a song cycle. And then I put names under that, and the list kept growing. And I referenced this before, but like, there are composers who are literally the reason that I am a singer today. They are the people who championed me with art song groups early in my career, people who would never have hired me if Libby Larson hadn't told them to, you know, that kind of thing. So how do you choose between people who have made such a significant impact on your life? And the list kept growing and growing and growing. And so I sat down with a friend of mine who was a composer, and I said, I have this crazy idea that I need to commission like a lot of songs, like a lot. And is that weird, or is that dumb? Like, is everyone going to tell me no? Because I don't know, is this just the dumbest idea I've ever had? And he was like, no. And I want to be part of it too. So then I started asking people if they wanted to be part of it, and no one said no. And within like 2 months, I had over 40 composers, to be honest. And I decided, you know, my birthday is in 2 years, a year and a half, and that's like enough time to ask composers for songs. Because, you know, you really want to give composers a schedule, because they have things already on their calendar. So you want to give them enough time to be able to fit you in. So I was like, 2 years is my 40th birthday. I'm going to commission 40 songs for my 40th birthday. And it was like a lightning strike. And it was just like the idea kind of, you know, filled my heart and became like kind of my driving force. But then the pandemic happened. And so I was sitting on this island again, stranded on an island, working on a CD project, but also communicating with composers and following up and saying, hey, what, you know, poetry flying back and forth and ideas flying back and forth. And so in this time when I'm starved for collaboration, I have this project that I started before the pandemic, but that allowed me to continue to collaborate from a distance. And that's kind of what I want. That's what the reason for this has become, is like, it is possible for everyone to do this. And I don't know why it took me 40 years to realize that I could be commissioning songs, or that I should be commissioning songs, but I wish I had realized it earlier. And I'm hoping that other singers, other music lovers, you don't have to be a musician yourself, you can just love music, can work with the people around them to create collaborative art. And so that's kind of been like the great kind of realization of this, is like, no, we can all do this. Let's do it, everybody.
yeah, absolutely. And I think like, yeah, for singers, there's so many, you know, throughout our training, like, in a sense, we learn a lot of things, but at the same time, you know, a lot of rules come into place. And yeah, I don't think like singers necessarily have, more and more now, yes, especially here in the States, but, you know, I don't think it's an obvious thing for a singer to, you know, think like, oh, I'm going to commission a song, you know, and to give guidelines or no guidelines. I know you left it very free for your
I did.
collaborators.
I did.
Um,
Yeah.
mhm.
Well, mainly
So,
because I'm interested in the art they're making. So if I gave them
mhm.
too many rules, then I wouldn't be getting pure them, you know? And I'm interested. I love talking to composers. I love asking them how they came to do what they do and what drives them about what they do. What have they written that they just sit back and go, "Ah, damn, I'm good." You know, like I want to give them the chance to do that. And so if I
Yeah.
didn't want to put too many rules on it, and so like yeah.
Yeah, I love it. So now there's going to be these 40 songs by 40 different composers. Is
Mhm.
it 40 different poets as
Yes.
well, or yeah.
Not quite. Not quite. It is
Okay.
actually, so the one thing I wanted to avoid was, a couple of years ago, actually right around the time of the hurricanes, I curated an anthology of
Yeah.
songs for soprano for the New Music Shelf. And I
Mhm.
had like something like 500 entries to listen through. And the thing I noticed was that it was a lot of Emily Dickinson, a lot of Walt Whitman, a lot of Sarah Teasdale. And the reason for this is not because people don't know how to be curious about poetry. It's that public domain becomes such a big issue when you're a composer, getting permission to use someone poetry. Some poets don't want their words
Mhm.
set to music. They think the art is
Mhm.
complete, beginning and end, do not need a composer's response to it. So you have to be
Mhm.
sensitive to that. But
Mhm.
also, someone might die and then they don't actually own the publishing rights to their poems in most cases. So then like the trust, their whatever, whoever has control of their words after they die could rescind permission for you to use
Uh-huh.
that poem. So some composers are very wary of using words that aren't in the public domain. And so that's why you keep seeing the same poets over and over and over. And so, it was important to me that I didn't have 40 songs with words by Emily Dickinson and Walt Whitman.
Yeah.
But I also think they are beautiful words. So I didn't make that please avoid, but I've been really lucky because I didn't have to say that. Like everyone
Uh-huh.
has done very creative like word finding, and some people are writing their own words. And actually, one of my friends sent me a poem about motherhood when my baby was young, and I was they just resonated with me so deeply. And so in only one case I approached Libby Larson and said, I need these words to music so I can sing them because they are my heart. And like, would you please set these particular words? And she said yes. And so then she's making, and then I approached the poet and said, well, actually, first I approached the poet and said, this is what I'm doing. Here's what I want. Would you be okay with that? And the poet said yes. And now we're Facebook friends. And like, so there has been some of that kind of in the background of, people, me trying to pull together. So that poet I didn't know ahead of time. But then I was in the Chicago
Mhm.
Children's Choir with a woman named Christina Ramirez, who's a wonderful poet. And I think today 2 composers have chosen poetry of hers that I gave the composers
Uh-huh.
like a folder of like, here are some things I like. You don't have to choose from them,
Okay.
but here they are. And so, but that's really great because that pulls this woman who's been my friend since we were in high school into this project. So it's making connections, collaborative connections between the people in my life, which is just so fun and fulfilling.
Yeah, yeah. So are all of these songs going to be recorded in an album? Is that I saw on your website that you're on the press release that this can be booked as a concert too, right?
Yes. Yeah,
Hmm.
so ideally, I mean, COVID has thrown everything up in the air. So when I started out in 2019, I was like, okay, here's the deadline for the songs. And then on my 40th birthday, we're going to have a premiere concert event weekend thing. And then I'm going to have a recording, and then I'm going to have this. And I just had this thing all planned out. But as we all know, flexibility was required. And so we had composers who just couldn't meet the deadline because life is hard this year. And so I've realized that the 40 songs is actually just the beginning. It's like me saying, I will intentionally be commissioning songs in my life. and 40 is a start. It catches me up, right? So I basically removed all deadlines. Get your song to me when you can, because, you know, I know you want to, and you will when life allows it. But I'm not being like very strict about things anymore for a lot of reasons. But yes, it will be. I'm recording the first batch the first week in August, and that will become a CD at some point, hopefully not 3 years like the last one. No hurricanes, please. But yeah, so it'll definitely become a CD or a series of CDs, because 40 is actually a lot, and again, the number is going way above 40 at this point. But you know, I'd love to see if I can get everything published. That my greatest desire is that these songs not end with me. I want everyone to be singing them.
That was my next question. Wow, we're on the same page. I was going to ask, you know, because I think with young singers, it happens a lot that you know, maybe that now there's more and more, you know, new music, but like, how do you program that? Like, are you allowed to record it? Are you allowed to program it? How does that end? You know, the other end, because I love this that you're saying, you know, they don't just belong to you. You want everyone, once they're out there, you know, to perform them. So for the people who would want to perform these songs, how does that work?
So hopefully, like I said, ideally someday everything will be collected in an anthology that's published all together. So you get one song from all of these composers, and you can say, oh, I love this song. Oh my gosh, I need to go to their website and buy everything else they ever wrote, because this is amazing. That's what will be amazing. But until that happens, I'm gonna keep everything really well documented on my website, and make sure that I have links to their websites, so that when each song is premiered, and once it's had its premiere performance and it's out in the world, you can go to all of these composers, for the most part, have websites where you can purchase their music. So even if I do an anthology in the future, you will still be able to purchase their scores directly from them. They will still own their scores. You know, again, it's really all about kind of, I think a lot of young singers are scared to learn new music, sorry, because they think it's going to be hard. And sometimes it is hard. And so that's another reason that I was really passionate that a CD needs to come out, or at least recordings need to be accessible. Because I think when someone hears something and it's removed from those scary notes on the page, and they can just approach it from that kind of like visceral first time hearing this makes my soul happy to hear this. I need to also do this. I think that's important, because I want people to sing these songs. So I'm trying to do everything I can to make these songs, and by extension these composers and new music, accessible to anyone who wants to interact with it.
Yeah, absolutely. And you raise an interesting topic. You know, this idea that new music is and contemporary music is very hard to learn, to sing. It can be. It can also be very lyrical. I know one of your composers is Felix Gerard. He's a really good friend of mine. You know, and he is an example of someone who, you know, composes in a very like lyrical way. So
well, like all art song is subjective, right? So you're going to hear it, and you're either going to like respond on a gut level, or you're going to be like, that's not for me. And that reaction is going to be entirely different based on who you are and what your tastes are. So I really wanted to choose composers who had different points of view. And I think you'll find that like literally every single one of these, you're never going to, you know, confuse them for each other, because their voices are so unique. But, you know, Felix is actually someone that I have never met in person, but it was really important to me that I find out who's doing work in art song, and I support them in my meager way. You know, if Felix Gerard is out there online doing this work, I want to do what I can to support him, because that's, you know, this kind of signal boosting, and like, he loves this as much as I love this. So we should know each other. So we've never met in person. I only know him from Facebook, but someday when the COVID is over, hopefully I'll get to go have coffee with him, and we can really like bring our friendship IRL. But you know, he's not the only one that's like that. It's
Mm-hmm.
that's the beauty of social media, is that even though
Yes.
we're far apart, if this pandemic had happened 10 years ago, none of the ways that we have continued to collaborate and make art and just stay connected as humans would be available to us. So that's, you know, a bright
Absolutely. I
silver
always
lining.
say I'm very grateful for the internet this whole
Yes,
year, you know,
yes.
like it's kept us going for sure and connected. So, with this idea of, you know, learning and performing contemporary music, I'm interested to talk about it a little bit also in the context of an opera, of
Hmm.
creating a new role. And I know, you premiered a role by Tom Cipulo, and there's also a recording
Yeah.
of this opera, right? So can you tell us a little bit about that and how, or is it any different than preparing new art songs for, you know, creating a role? What was that experience like for you?
Sure, I'm going to rewind just a little bit because the first
Yes.
time I premiered a role was in grad school. I went to the Peabody Conservatory, and a composer named Thomas Benjamin wrote an opera for our school, like for the you know, Peabody Opera Theater for that year. Roger Brenyet was the librettist, and the opera was unfortunately named The Alien Corn. It's on a short story by Somerset Maugham called The Alien Corn. I might have renamed it if it were me, because let me tell you, my resume gets some laughs just from that one little line. But The Alien Corn, I played this woman, and it was the first time in my life I had been handed a score, and there was no recording available to learn it. I don't know about you, but especially when I was younger, I couldn't learn something unless I could listen to it over and over and over again. And it's actually very difficult to learn something you've never heard. And I'm not the world's best pianist, so I can't just, you know, sit down and play the score and feel like I've immersed myself. I'm dependent upon help from pianists and orchestras and conductors and coaches. So I remember struggling through this experience when I was in grad school, but also being like, but I'm the first person to ever sing this. Oh
Yes.
my gosh, like that's a high. Maybe
Yeah.
I've been chasing that high ever since. I don't know. but but yeah, Tom Chipulo is another one of those composers who I literally don't think I would be a singer today if he hadn't championed me early on. And he wrote this opera called The Parting last year with librettist David Mason. And I guess it wasn't last year. Where did the years go? In
I was gonna say
2019.
last year.
I'm telling you, like 2020 is just like gone from memory. But in 2019, he wrote The Parting, and it was a three-person opera. Me and Michael Mays and Kathy Cook playing three characters who are in Hungary during the Holocaust, and it was very, very sad, but absolutely beautiful. Some of the most gorgeous music I've ever sung. And again, an experience where I'm handed a score and said, you you get to decide. Like no one has ever done this, and you don't. There's no mold to fit. Um, Become this character. And the craziest part about that character for me was that, you know, she was a real person, and the central figure is this poet, her husband, who died in the Holocaust, but she lived until 2014, and she spent the rest of her life promoting his work so that his work wouldn't be forgotten by history. And to think that I'm like in my lifetime, this woman and I could have had a conversation. So it wasn't even, you know, kind of creating a character from fiction. It was trying to find the heart of a real woman who existed and for a long time, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And so was this, did you perform this or was it just sort of recording? Was the recording separate from the performance?
So the opera was commissioned by a group called Music of Remembrance in
Uh-huh.
Seattle, and they present works and commission works on the theme of the Holocaust. And so it was performed in Seattle at I'm blanking where it was performed, but what is the major hall in Seattle? My brain is dead. It's been so long since I've sung in a
I've
hall.
actually never
Uh,
been to Seattle.
yeah.
I really want to go.
Benyoroya Hall, that's what it was. Benyoroya
Okay.
Hall. So we did a performance there. And then the next day we went into the recording studio and did the studio recording of it. And then the next day we went to San Francisco and did it there in is it Memorial Hall, I think? I don't know. So we've
Yeah.
done it twice. And then I was supposed to do it last March in New York with Chelsea Opera and
Uh-huh.
different cast except for me. But that was where I was. I was in rehearsals for that when COVID hit, and I like ran screaming back to the island in fear. So that's kind of that's what that's kind of like
Yeah.
this weird bookend.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, but hopefully you'll bring it to New York because I want to see it.
Oh, it is so beautiful. There's this duet called In Your Two Arms, and it's this
Mm.
rocking, it's a cappella between the soprano and the baritone, and it's just devastating. And look it up on Spotify if you would like to hear it. It's
Yeah,
on there. It's Michael Mason, myself,
absolutely.
but it's just ecstatically simple and beautiful.
Yeah. And so I'm curious, you mentioned you did the first performance in Seattle and then you went to the studio and recorded it, right? So
Yes.
how was that? What was, you're essentially still performing when you have to, in a studio, but what are the differences between those two performances? And have you done recordings where, it was just the live performance that was being recorded? Do you find a difference between those two experiences?
I think when you are doing it live, you're usually in front of an audience. So I did one other live recording, which was the James Matheson project I referenced earlier.
Mm-hmm.
This Yarlung does not traditionally do any editing. That they use this very,
Mm-hmm.
very fancy surround sound, no editing, live, do or die kind of thing. And so they brought in an audience for that recording. So it was me
Mm-hmm.
on a stage with pianist Tom Sauer and an audience. And we did it several times for them so we could pick which performance we wanted, but
Right.
there was no editing at all.
Oh,
That's
wow.
a live performance that was released as a commercial recording. So
Uh-huh.
there was pressure there because James Matheson's music is kaleidoscopic and it's so detailed and beautiful and colorful, but it's very rhythmically difficult in
Mm.
all the best ways. So it
Mm-hmm.
wasn't like I'm going to sing this and it's going to be right every time I sing it. I made little errors here and there every time I sing, and I've done it
Yeah.
live. I've done it memorized for years, but it's that difficult, So there was a lot of
Yeah.
pressure because I wanted to get it as close to perfect as possible because again, I expect people to listen to these CDs and maybe even use them when they want to learn that music. And I want to do the best job I can so I'm not leading someone else down the line astray. So there
Yeah.
was that, right? So that's an experience I've had. Then Confessions, it's edited. It's a normal studio recording. So, we did everything a few times. Oh, I don't love that thing there. Oh, you can hear my page flip. Could you edit that out? That kind
Mm-hmm.
of thing. So I've done that. I've done a couple other projects where you get to do that too. But parting, we only had like it's a 45-minute opera. We only
Uh-huh.
had 4 hours to get it recorded. So we couldn't do a ton of takes. We had to get it right pretty much the first time. There were maybe a couple of sections where we went back and, it was like an obvious flub, so let's go back and restart. But for the most part, it is as close to a live performance recording as an opera recording probably gets. But it was on the same stage that we had performed it the night before, so we had some of that kind of spatial
Energy.
memory and
Yeah.
experience and that energy, right? Either you just sing differently when there's an audience in front of you. There was no audience for the recording, but you feel that muscle memory of what that having that audience, what the electricity of having that audience there did for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's actually what I'm always chasing when I do a studio recording is like
Exactly.
I don't want to be just perfect. I don't want the notes and rhythms to be just so and lose that that energy you only get when you're nervous.
Exactly. And that leads to my next question actually, because I think this whole recording process is so interesting and that you've had all these experiences because now we all have to record so much, right? And young singers are all of a sudden, having to, learn this skill of like, really having to record often.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, at home or somewhere where there is no audience, like a lot of actual performances are being recorded now without an audience.
Mm-hmm.
And I know a lot of the questions that arose at the beginning with all of this was like, well, but like, how do I, like recreate that for myself, to so that the recording is alive, right? So is there anything you can share on that and, mentally, and to find yourself in the right spot to be able to record?
So, like most singers, I have done a concert for 4 people. Like, it has happened. Like, you think, "Oh, there's going to be a huge audience. This has been well publicized." And you show up with your game face and your gown, and you are ready to sing for all these people. And 4 people showed up. It's happened. It has.
Yeah.
And you have to produce the same amount of love and communication and space for those 4 people that you would have done for 400 people.
Yes,
It's
because
your
they are
job.
there.
They are there, and they want to be amazed. Like,
Yeah.
every audition panel you have ever sung for is looking for you to amaze them. And if you don't, then they're not going to hire you because they're looking for that magic. So the same energy that you are going to put out for an audition where maybe there's 2 people from middle of nowhere opera company and they're not even looking at you, they're looking at their paper, and you have to just find a way to capture them. It's that same energy. So if you are used to singing auditions, bring that. I am a terrible auditioner. I am the worst at auditions. So that doesn't work for me. So what I do is I really get into the text, and I do that all the time. That's one of the reasons I love what I do. It's probably one of the reasons I love art song as much as I do. But when you think about those words and the stories that you're trying to put out there, and you really care about them, it is so much easier for anybody watching, whether in the room with you or over the computer, to care too. Because if you don't show them how much you care, genuinely care, why should they? So for me, it goes back to text usually.
Yeah. Ooh, I love that. I love that. I think that's what we were talking about, like learning how to become a singer, until you're not in that, stressful situation or having to figure it out, because it can be so personal. I think it's interesting to hear, everyone's experiences and perspective to inform your own, but at the end of the day, you're the one who has to like get out there and sing, so you have to make it work for yourself. So it is very personal.
Yeah.
um, Wonderful. So right now I'm gonna open the floor in case anyone has questions, but in the meantime, if while we wait, I wanted to, well, first, thank you for, it's been an amazing conversation. I was so excited to talk to you. I'm big on new music and contemporary music too. And, and I listened to your CD. I loved it. So I'm very excited to see, to start hearing all these songs from the
I know, I
40s.
can't wait to get them out. They're so amazing. I want them out there, and I don't quite have a plan yet.
So, well, I know they will. I think, if the pandemic has taught us something, is that it's okay to take time, and that a lot of times it's for the better.
Yeah.
So I know this is a huge project, so I'm sure this is taking, all of your energy. But aside from that, is there anything else you have in the works? Just like life, traveling, reading?
Oh, travel. What is travel? I am actually really excited to make my Seattle Symphony debut in January, because I was supposed to do it last year in 2020, Beethoven 9, and I was just thrilled about that. That's a really exciting thing, and it obviously got canceled because of COVID, and then it got canceled again, but I was lucky enough that they're honoring the contract, so I'm going to do it next January. So I'm excited about that. I have a couple projects that I'm not allowed to announce yet that I'm excited about. But I think I'm just excited for the world to start opening up again. I tell this story a lot, and it's going to get old, but after the hurricanes, I talk about the hurricanes a lot because it was just so, it was just too just too life, whatever, put everything in perspective. But after the hurricanes, I felt like nothing was ever going to be okay again. It was so bad, I could not imagine how everything would be okay again.
Mm-hmm.
And I watched in slow motion as everything got okay again.
Mm-hmm.
And it really helped me understand A, the power of community and everybody working together towards a common goal, but also B, that like it gets better. Like things, you won't realize it. You won't wake up one day and be like, everything's better and everything's back to normal.
Yeah.
You will see it happen. And I'm really looking forward to watching the slow progress out of the COVID stupor and the COVID, everything that has happened to our lives in the last year. We're going to rebuild.
Yeah.
We are. I know we will, because it's who we are as a community, and we get to be there for it. And it's going to change our lives. So I'm really excited to do it with all of you.
Yeah. Oh, I love that. And I do, as terrible as all of this is, I do feel like we're all much wiser, stronger, and just aware of the community and the people around us. So I think that's very important. I'm so excited for your Seattle Symphony debut. That's very exciting. And I'm glad, some of these contracts are still being honored for future seasons. So have you sung Beethoven Ninth already?
I have. I did it with a group called Chorales in Washington, D.C. a few years ago. But, anytime I get to like put on a gown, I'm a happy person. So like, have gown, we'll sing your Messiah. Please call me.
Yes. Well, I want to thank you so much. It was really so inspiring. I feel like you have so much just wisdom and interesting stories to share that I think can give young singers a lot of perspective. So thank you for that. And then I want to make sure everyone knows where to find everything. So please list your recordings, Spotify website, everything.
Well, actually, I would say just go to my website, laurastrickling.com, and everything will lead you to where you want to be.
Great. And definitely follow Laura on Instagram. You can probably listen to everything on Spotify, right? All the recordings?
Yeah, everything except for one is lost to history. So, but everything else is on there.
Okay, but you can also buy physical CDs because it's always special.
Yes, please do. My label would appreciate it.
Yes. Well, if everything works okay with Instagram, this should stay recorded on our IGTV, and I'll put it on our YouTube too. So if you want to share it, if anyone missed a part of it, because you should watch all of this, hopefully everything works and it will be on our IGTV. But thank you everyone for joining us, and thank you so much, Laura, for being here with us today.
Thank you. Really a pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
Bye. We'll be in touch. I'll follow all your adventures.
And yours.
Thank you. Bye, guys.
Have a good day.
Laura. Thank you so much.